Good morning and welcome to Shattering Myths. I am Yahowah. Each weekday here on GCN, we strive to expose the destructive myths that are associated with religion and politics, with patriotism in the media, and with military and economic schemes. Today will be no exception. Instead of merely presenting the news, our mission is to understand what is actually occurring behind the headlines and how these events will shape our world. Then during our second hour, we're going to engage God on his terms, through evidence and reason, since his is the lone reliable voice in an exceedingly disingenuous world. Over the next 2 hours, if you'd like to participate in this discussion, our number is toll-free, 877-300-7645. Scott, there was a commercial that played that is actually germane to our topic today about Christian mingle being used to find God's match for your life. Let's play our view of that.
Sometimes it feels like you'll never find the one God intended for you.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone is now dumber for having listened to it.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is the nature of religion, particularly in the impression that God wants to intervene and play a demonstrative role in our lives, have the opportunity to usurp the free will of the individual and everyone surrounding them so that he can orchestrate things and be a cosmic either killjoy or sexual aid. Well, that is a lead-in to our subject today. This week, UNICEF, which is a United Nations agency, reported in New York their findings of the most comprehensive study that has ever been done on FGM. Now, not a lot of folks know what FGM is, and it's not a pretty topic, but it shows the attitude towards women and towards sex, particularly in the religion of Islam. It is female genital mutilation. The article from the United Nations begins with, more than 30 million girls are at risk of being subjected to female genital mutilation over the next decade alone. This study by UNICEF has found. The United Nations study said more than 125 million girls and women alive today had been forced to undergo the procedure in countries that are now opposed to the procedure where it was practiced. So it's 125 million girls and women alive today that have undergone it, just in countries that have come to the realization, we ought not be doing this. Ritual cutting of the girls' genitals, ritual, understand ritual and religious, cutting of girls' genitals is practiced by, in this article now, based upon the United Nations, says in some African, Middle Eastern, and Asian communities in the belief that it protects a woman's virginity. They could not say Islamic. As a matter of fact, you'll find that there are denials of any association with FGM with Islam. We will dig more deeply into the evidence and show you that is strictly a product of political correctness, where evidence and reason no longer matter and where good judgment is considered a crime. The United Nations wants to end FGM. And by the way, the reason that female genital mutilation takes place in Islamic countries is twofold. One is that in Islam, a girl that is raped by a man, and in Islam, men are savages. Not all men are savages, but all good Muslims are savages. Islam was spread in large degree by promises of Muhammad to allow his barbarians, his jihadists, his mujahideen, to be able to rape the women of the communities they savaged. And so a huge part of the motivation for promoting Islam was not only robbing those communities, not only enslaving the children, not only kidnapping for ransom, but rape. Muhammad himself participating. But you see, in Islam, when a woman is raped, and we talked about this story yesterday, the religion does not allow for the prosecution of the rapist. The rapist is exonerated. The rapist is exonerated because the guilty party in any rape is the woman. She is incarcerated. She disgraces the family. So if a woman is raped by a perverted Muslim man, it is the man who is exonerated and the woman who is not only jailed, sometimes killed, and many times honor killed by her own parents, but that the rape of the woman, rather than being something to be sorrowful over, so dishonors the family that a family will do anything to keep their daughter from ever having sex outside of marriage. Second, parents sell their daughters. That's the nature of Islam. It's a part of the religion to sell one's daughter. And so they will sell very young girls, 12, 13-year-old girls, to men in their 40s and 50s. It's strictly religious pedophilia, against something that Muhammad practiced, so it's legal and encouraged in Islam. And a girl who is proven to be a virgin through this ungodly procedure is worth more money. That's the reasons for it. Now, the consequence of it is that it assures that the woman would get absolutely no pleasure out of sex. So if she is married and finds one of the 1 in a million Muslims that actually finds a loving husband, she will never enjoy it. She is nothing but a piece of meat. It is certain, the purpose of this is to make certain that sex with a Muslim man is an act of conquest, an act of domination. It isn't lovemaking. It's the nature of the Islamic paradise. It's the motivation for Muslims to kill, particularly as suicide bombers. It is part of the disgusting nature of this religion. Well, anyway, the United Nations, as the article reads, wants action to end female genital mutilation. The UN Children's Fund survey, and this is done to children. It's typically perpetrated by a combination of the child's mother and a man in the community that is usually a religious leader, a Muslim religious leader in that community. The UN Children's Fund survey, described as the most comprehensive to date on the issue, found that female genital mutilation is a violation of the girls' rights to health. It's extraordinarily dangerous to them. Their well-being and self-determination, said UNICEF Deputy Executive Director Gita Rao Gupta. What is clear from this report is that legislation alone is not enough. Yeah, they won't ever say Islam, but the fact of the matter is that there are countries where there have been moves legislatively to criminalize the practice, and yet it's had no effect whatsoever on the perpetration of the mutilation of little girls. And that is because religion always trumps politics. The report, Female Genital Mutilation / Cutting, a statistical overview and exploration of the dynamics of change, was released in Washington, D.C. I said New York, I misspoke. The study, which pulled together 20 years of data from 29 countries in Africa and the Middle East where FGM is still practiced, found girls were less likely to be cut than they were some 30 years ago. Well, that's partially true. there are about 6 or 7 countries where girls are less likely to be mutilated than they were 30 years ago. Many countries, though, in fact, the majority of them where the practice is the most prevalent, haven't changed one iota. So that is a misleading statement. And by the way, what do you think that this area that they surveyed, which is northern Africa and the Middle East, have in common? If you were to, and the map of this is Middle East and northern Africa. Do you think that maybe the preponderance of the people that are living in the Middle East and northern Africa are Muslims? That would be the connection. They say that there were 3 times less likely to be cut in Kenya, which is a Muslim minority nation, and Tanzania, also decidedly Muslim minority nation, and that the rates had dropped by half in Benin and the Central African Republic, Iraq, Liberia, and Nigeria. Now, there is a little side note here that they didn't want to share with you, which is that in Iraq, the reason that female genital mutilation is uncommon, and it's been very small percentage for a very long time, is twofold. Female genital mutilation is a Sunni practice in Islam, not a Shia practice in Islam. So you do not see it happening in a country like Iran, and in Iraq it has a very, very low percentage. In fact, in Iraq it is practiced primarily by the Kurds. It is a majority of the Sunni Kurds practice female genital mutilation, while the most Sunnis in Iraq, which represent about 30% of Iraq's population, don't practice it. At least, in fact, if you were to take non-Sunni Kurds, maybe 25%, because they were led by a secular government, one that we managed to depose. However, now under a Shia government, a Shia theocracy, Shias don't practice FGM. So, as we return to this study to look at where it is practiced and where it is not, and by the way, even in Nigeria, the issues in certain countries within Africa is that Islam and animism, Islam and even voodoo have been mixed together so that there's an influence, a positive influence on Islam by the practices of pagan religions in Africa, particularly voodoo, that diminish the likelihood that girls are savaged in this way. We'll return to Shattering Myths after the commercial break. I know this is an R-rated topic, but when you're dealing with 125 to 150 million, depending on which report from the United Nations you are privy to, on the number of girls and women who have been mutilated, and you add that to the number who will soon be mutilated, you're dealing with almost 200 million women and girls. And when you're dealing with that number of people who are being savaged by their religion, we ought to talk about it. It is something that we ought to discuss, and even if it is a sensitive and uncomfortable topic, the consequence of religion is something we ought never hide from. We ought to expose it. We ought to condemn it. We have Robin calling in. You have a comment on this rather sorry and sad, savage topic, Robin?
Yes, I do, sweetie. I have a stepsister who married Assad and learned the language, converted to Islam, and I asked her about this. And she said, oh, no. When she asked her mother-in-law about it, and when they were over there, and the mother-in-law got wide-eyed and said, what are you talking about? And then, they were doing that in the Sudan to the Christian slaves as they were being captured. And so the conclusion I came to was that it was more cultural than it was religious.
Yeah, that's not true. Yeah, that's not true. That is, if someone is a Shia Muslim, then it is not part of their religion. If they're a Sunni Muslim, it is absolutely part of their religion, and we'll discuss that in a moment. The evidence for this, but the reality is that we exercise good judgment by coming to know the facts and then making connections between the facts. And when I share with you where female genital mutilation is prevalent and how prevalent it is, with the percentage of the population that is Sunni Muslim, becomes impossible to deny the direct connection.
But then just not so popular in Saudi Arabia.
Well, it is popular. It is practiced in Saudi Arabia, not to the extent that it is per capita in other countries. First, the Saudi Arabians would not allow the survey to be taken in Saudi Arabia. And the reason that it could not be taken in Saudi Arabia is that this survey was taken via a poll, and Saudi women are not allowed out of the house unless accompanied by a man, and they can never talk to a stranger. So in Saudi Arabia, because of the savage persecution of women, where a woman can't drive a car, she can't even leave her home unless she is escorted by her father or by her husband. She's kept, as essentially as a sex slave in Saudi Arabia. There is no access to women to be able to report on this. Now, let's be clear, though. In Saudi Arabia, not only are women treated worse than we would treat a dog. I mean, I will let my dog wander around without me being holding my dog on a leash, which is not possible in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabians, when they bring in help from, because Saudi Arabians don't work. It's one of the parts of Islam that is disgusting. When they bring in workers from other countries, they savage them. They burn them, they cut them, they mutilate them, they imprison them, they whip them. It is a constant legacy of Saudi Arabia as to how savage the Saudi Arabians are on their help. I mean, for a Saudi Arabian woman to pretend to be moral is a absolute disgrace. It is easily the most despicable, the most savage, the most repulsive, the most perverted community of Muslims in the world.
Well, of course, they've lived here. And what they told him if he married her that they would disown him. Well, of course, they're not so estranged to this now as they were when they were married. They've had 4 beautiful children. He's worked 2 jobs here to support them and get the things that they've needed, and they don't want to kill anybody.
Yeah, well, for someone to be a bad Muslim and to leave their culture and to try to practice and integrate within another community, there are lots of bad Muslims that are good people. Doesn't change the fact that Islam is the most disgusting religion ever perpetrated on humankind. But if you were to judge a religion by the worst adherents to that religion, you'd have nothing. Hello, welcome back to Shattering Myths. Return to this article, but before I do, I'm going to say that having done 3,000 radio interviews on talk radio programs across the country over a period of about 5 or 6 years following the writing of Tea with Terrorists and Prophet of Doom, and in the immediate aftermath of the suicide bombings, the Islamic suicide bombings of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, I found one response more inappropriate probably than any other that I heard along that way, which was about 1 out of every 20 hosts of these talk radio programs would attempt to sweep away all of the evidence against Islam, being a savage religion, being a perverted religion, the realization that Muhammad was amongst the most disgusting sexual perverts who ever lived, and that the religion was a call to arms and that it is a terrorist manifesto. They would try to sweep it all aside by saying, but I know a Muslim family that lives down the street, and, you know, their yard looks nice, their children seem sweet, and you know, they're Muslim and they're peace-loving people, so I can't believe what you're saying. And this anecdote that that someone's perceptions of someone who, in all likelihood, is a lousy Muslim, somehow is evidence that contradicts all of the mountains of evidence to the contrary, is an abandonment of reason. And it is very much like someone saying that, you know, every time there's a mass murder and somebody does something despicable in a community, the neighbors will all gather together and said, oh, he looked like such a nice fellow, and he'd come and go, and he kept his yard neat, and he never showed any signs of being, you know, a savage. You know, how are we to know? And so I'd be really careful of ever using anecdotal evidence like that. It is, if you want to know the nature of a religion, study its founder, study the words and deeds of its founder, study its original text, and then look at the manifestations of those texts throughout history. In the aggregate, and you will have the clearest understanding of what's happening. Now, as we turn to female genital mutilation, it remains, according to this report, almost universal in Somalia. Yeah, it's 99% in Somalia. It remains universal in Guinea, in Djibouti, and Egypt. Those countries, the first that they list on this report, the percentage of female genital mutilation are 98, 96, 93, and 91% respectively, and the percentage of the Sunni Muslim population in those countries are the same, 98, 99, 96, and 90% in Egypt, where it is 91%. Prevalence of female genital mutilation. And my guess is that in Egypt that the Copt population has now declined to about 9%, which would make it universal amongst Muslims. There was a little discernible decline, they said, in Chad, Gambia, Mali, Senegal, the Sudan, or Yemen, where the rates are very high, and the report says there's no decline in the practice. Now, they did say that they found that most girls and women, and a significant number of boys, which means a minority of boys, oppose the practice in some countries, like in Chad and in Sierra Leone, where the majority of the population is not Sunni Muslim. They didn't take that into consideration, but that explains the answer. This article says the challenge now is to let girls and women, boys and men, speak out loudly and clearly and announce that they want this harmful practice abandoned. Well, the problem is that the majority of men and Muslim men in these countries don't want the practice abandoned, because it means that they don't need to worry ever about pleasing their wives. This idea of being concerned about making certain that your partner enjoys relations with you goes away, because it's impossible. And so the woman becomes nothing but an object to use and to be wholly unconcerned about. And that's the reason why the overwhelming preponderance of men want the practice continued. Now, it's interesting that women will continue to savage their own daughters, but this is the Stockholm Syndrome. It is the nature of Islam, and while their daughters are screaming in agony, they will say, I was subject to it, you will be subject to it as well. The challenges, they say here, according to the report, is to open up the practice to greater public scrutiny. But how is that going to happen if we do not make the connection between female genital mutilation and the religion? They say here that it is entrenched in social attitudes, and yet they don't want to say it's entrenched in religious attitudes. In some communities, FGM, also known as female circumcision, is seen as a traditional ritual used culturally to ensure virginity and to make a woman marriageable. Again, everything the United Nations is attempting to do to disassociate Islam from the practice. It typically involves procedures that alter or injure the female genital organs. In fact, they mutilate virtually all of them. It is an unbelievably savage procedure. I don't want to go into what is destroyed because that is way beyond the rating of this program. The dangers of female genital mutilation include severe bleeding, many women die, problems urinating, infections, infertility, and risk of newborn deaths during childbirth. It is also, like in a country like the United Kingdom, where there is this huge Islamic influx. There are, on average, between 70 and 100 girls that are admitted to emergency rooms who are on the precipice of death as a result of this practice being perpetrated on them in their homes, operated in their homes as opposed to even in a doctor's office or a hospital. Here's the numbers. Somalia, which has a 99% Sunni Muslim population, there's a 98% female genital mutilation. Guinea, 90% Muslim, 5% to 96% female genital mutilation. Djibouti, 94% Islamic population, 93% prevalence. In Egypt, where the Islamic population is almost entirely Sunni, and they represent 90% of the population, and I think today it may even be 91%, there's a 91% correlation. You know, it's also interesting in Egypt that 95% of Egyptian women say they have been sexually abused. So Egypt is the absolute proof that there is a direct correlation between Sunni Islam, and Egypt is the headquarters for teachings on Sunni Islam. As a matter of fact, the Muslim Brotherhood has, in their new constitution, moved to overturn the law against female genital mutilation and are now saying that it is obligatory. So Egypt, 90 to 91% Sunni Muslim, 90 to 91% female genital mutilation. Deny that facts. Deny that evidence, will you? In Eritrea, there are 50% Sunni Muslims and very high percentage of female genital mutilation. Mali, 90% Sunni Muslim, 90% female genital mutilation. In Sierra Leone, the numbers are the same. The Sudan, 97% Muslim, but about 80 to 90% Sunni Muslim, 88% female genital mutilation. Gambia, it's 75% Sunni Muslim, 75% female genital mutilation. Gambia, 90% Muslim, 75% of those Sunni, 75% genital mutilation. It goes on and on. What you find in a country like the Ivory Coast, 40% Sunni Muslim, 40% genital mutilation. There is a direct correlation between Sunni Islam and female genital mutilation. Now, prevalent but unwilling to have the UN conducted survey were countries like Jordan, Oman, Pakistan, Palestine, if you want to use the mythical name, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Bahrain, Afghanistan, Malaysia, and Indonesia. While we have a moment here, I'd like to hear what Glenn has to say about FGM. Hello, Glenn. Welcome to the program. Hello, Glenn.
Don't want to take away from the significance of what you're saying here. I generally agree with the emphasis. Just would point out in terms of Islam being among the most savage or barbaric of religions. Certainly, if you reflect on things that were done by Mayans, Aztecs, Toltecs, almost all the Druids of Europe, and the Babylonians making the children pass through the fire to Moloch. Certainly, there have been more barbaric practices, but certainly this is a huge issue, a huge problem in modern day. It's a religion that continues into the modern day.
Yeah, I would say that you would be correct to say that there are aspects of the Mayan and the Aztec religions and aspects of the Babylonian and Assyrian religions and even aspects of the Druid religion which are worse than the practice of Islam today. However, there are aspects of Islam's practice today that are worse than those religions. I think the point, and you would agree with this, is that while there are aspects of both ancient pagan religions and Islam, which are where you could take aspects of each of them and say this is more savage than the other, and you could have a debate as to which one is the most savage of all time. The fact is that today Islam is by far the most savage religion in the world. So there's nothing that would compete with Islam in terms of being a popular religion in terms of being savage.
Right, in religion, yes. Well, yes, but even that can't hold against the truth of abortion, modern abortion. But, but yes, it's horrible.
Yes.
I'd like to hold if I may.
All right, that'll be fine. We'll return to Shattering Myths in a moment. After the break, I would like to review what the Islamic texts have to say about female genital mutilation. There is a Islamic religious word for it, which is also insightful. We'll return to Shattering Myths in a moment. Well, welcome back to Shattering Myths. The Islamic text refer to female genital cutting as kaifat. It is if you read a story in Wikipedia, it will tell you that it is not commanded by the Quran. And, this is just the ignorance of people. The Quran doesn't outline even 1% of what we would consider to be Sunnah, which is the basis of Sharia law. Sunnah, which is the practice of Muhammad, the words and deeds of Muhammad are detailed in the Hadith. And in the Hadith, there are specific disclosures from Muhammad about female circumcision. And so there is no question that it is sanctioned by Muhammad. And this notion that because it's not mentioned in the Quran doesn't mean that it's not therefore ordered by Islam is just wholly and completely ignorant of the nature of the religion. The Hadith that is devoted to this, by the way, reads that. And it's from the Abu Dawood collection. Abu Dawood, there's another one, by the way, and Muslim. Muslim is the second most revered collection of hadith. Dawood is the third most revered collection of hadith. And this is, the hadith collection states that a woman that women used to perform circumcision in Medina. It would be actually, they would have said Yathrib, because that was the name of the place at the time. Muhammad said to the women, do not cut her severely, for that is better for the woman and more desirable for her, for a husband. So here's Muhammad saying, you cut her, just don't completely mutilate her to the point where it isn't good for the husband anymore. That's how savage Muhammad was in all of this. There are another train of thought trying to discourage the connection between Islam and female genital mutilation says it can't be ascribed to Islam because the practice preceded Islam. Well, that's true. It was practiced at very narrowly and uncommonly in Africa as a relation of the animist and pagan religions of Africa prior to the birth of Islam. But isn't everything in Islam an incorporation of the pagan practices of people of the past? And so to say that it's not Islamic because it existed before Islam, everything in Islam, the Hajj is a pagan practice of the past. The 5 times a day bowing to the Kaaba was a pagan practice of the past. The name of the gods are Rahman and Allah, pagan practices of the past. Every aspect of Islam is based on pagan practices of the past. Glenn, I know you had another comment you wanted to make. Please go ahead.
Yes. Even the term FGM is a bit of a Madison Avenue 3-letter acronym euphemism. And if we really want to carry a sense of indignation in Westerners about this, the terminology is allowable. What we're talking about here is forced clitorectomy. And
yes.
The sooner Western women hear that, the sooner they're going to react. FGM is deliberately ambiguous. When you take all these women watching Sex in the City and all these other girl power TV programs get it through their heads that what we're talking about is forced clitorectomy, they're going to react.
Yeah, it's more. It is actually worse than that. Yes, what you've said.
Yes, I mean it affects all the external genitalia.
All of it is mutilated. All of it is cut away. But 100% of them remove the female clitoris. And the reason they do that is to make certain that the woman is unlikely ever to feel pleasure. So every source of pleasure for the woman and lovemaking is removed, so she becomes an object to be conquered. If you look at the Islamic paradise, where these sex toys in the Islamic paradise are virgins to be conquered, and they become perpetual virgins. You get back into the woman suffers pain and finds no pleasure, and the man gets a conquest. That's the entire mentality of Islam. And the fact that people don't understand why women are treated like rubbish in Islam is born on this. It's the reason that rape is approved. It's the reason that the reward in paradise is perpetual virgins. It's the reason that women's sexual organs are mutilated. It all has to do with the perverse nature of this disgusting religion, and it's a shame that so few people, even women's lib people that would say, you ought not to discriminate against one sex or the other, they won't rally to the cause and condemn Islam. It is amazing, but I appreciate your contribution, Glenn. It is more savage than I was willing to say, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. We'll return to Shattering Myths and turn to Yahowah's Torah after the commercial break.